If you have not yet studied parts 1, 2, or 3, tap the card now, flickering in the top right corner of your screen. Return once you have taken their measure, lest this tale gallop past you like a destrier in full charge. In part 1, Lord Eddard Stark untangled the Lannister web and set the realm upon a truer course. In part 2, wolves and lions bled upon Ashford's fields, and a plain iron crown passed to Ned's brow. In part 3, truth stood naked. Jon Snow was revealed as Aegon Targaryen, lawful son of Prince Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark. Daenerys Stormborn crossed the narrow sea, not as a scourge, but as a partner. And a pact of union, wolf and dragon, was sworn. Now, we turn the final page. This last chapter is not played for petty thrones, but for the dawn itself.
Can I stop you for a second? I won't keep you long. But if you love Game of Thrones lore like me, you ought to do one thing: like and subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it keeps our strength together, free as the wind on the wall.
The torch passed to Targaryen hands. The Red Keep's throne room groaned with bodies that day. Lords from Dorne in sand-bright silks, oaken reachmen broad as barns, lean veil falcons with steel eyes, river knights, storm knights, Northmen in furs, like snow on stone. King Eddard Stark stood beneath the swords of conquered kings and spoke the truth he had borne like a wound. "This man whom you have called Jon Snow," said Ned, voice like a winter bell, "is Aegon of House Targaryen, true-born of Rhaegar and Lyanna, married in secret, born in blood, and wedlock both. I hid him to spare the realm another war. I can hide him no longer." Uproar rolled like surf against rock. Some spat, some wept, some crossed themselves before the seven. But Ned's words were iron, and iron holds. Days later, Daenerys Targaryen rode through the King's Gate beneath wings. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion carved their shadows across the city like sundials of doom. Yet no sack followed. The small folk kept their doors shut, but their lamps lit. A silver-haired queen had come to parley, not to plunder. Behind doors, bolted against rumor, the three of them met. Ned, tall as a pine though bent by years. Daenerys, small and sun-hard, eyes like dusk amethysts. And Jon, Aegon, quiet as snowfall and twice as stubborn. "I will not see my city burn," said Ned. "I did not come to burn it," said Daenerys. "I came to free it from fear." Jon looked from wolf to dragon and said the only words that could turn enemies into kin. "Then wed me," he told Daenerys, "and let the crown pass by covenant, not conquest." It was agreed. The match would be solemnized before gods and men. After the war against the night, a great council would ratify what honor and necessity had already forged. The wedding itself was a thing Westeros had not seen in an age. First, a vigil in the godswood of the Red Keep. Jon and Daenerys knelt upon woven winter grass while the court kept silent watch beneath transplanted weirwood boughs. At dawn, the High Septon anointed them in Baelor's sept with 7 oils. The queen swore mercy where her father had sworn madness. The king swore duty where his fathers had sworn glory. Ned Stark bore witness. A crown had begun to float from direwolf brow to dragon hand, not seized, but given. Preparations for the last war. Peace allowed for purpose. Dragonstone's black slopes rang with picks as miners opened old vents of dragonglass. Smiths at the Citadel and Old Town learned to cast obsidian into arrowheads, spear points, and the cruel, leaf-shaped blades the first men had favored. Lord Montfort Velaryon at Driftmark laid down new dromons and longships to ferry these munitions north. Lady Shireen Baratheon held Dragonstone's beacon and wrote neat ledgers of the black glass, like the careful girl she had been, the capable lady she had become. In the north, prosperity showed in full barns. and full moonlit ridges. Dire wolves had multiplied in the wolfswood and along the shoulders of the frost fangs. Their dusk howls braided with the hammering of forges at Winterfell, where Robb Stark, named Protector of the North, drilled shield walls on the frozen practice grounds. The land remembers, he told his captains, and the land is watching. From the Reach, Sir Garland Tyrell oversaw grain fleets and sent rose-green lances north under standards stitched with a thin band of stark grey, rose-guarding wolf. The Vale loosed companies of sky-blue lancers under Lord Jon Royce, mail shining like frost. Dawn, bound by memory of Elia Martell, marched behind the spears of Prince Doran's banners, curtained in sun and sand, yet flint at the core. Lady Myrcella Lannister, ruling at Casterly Rock, opened her treasury for the crown's northern levies, lion gold paying for wolf spears. Even Sir Tommen Lannister, sworn to the White, drilled a new chapter of King's Guard in dragon glass-rimmed shields and black glass dirks. The realm, 7 parts by charter, 1 by necessity, leaned northward. The great threat from beyond the wall. The first raven came from Eastwatch, with feathers singed and a note that smelled of old ice. Then another from Castle Black, talons leaving scratches in the slate ledge beside my inkstone as if the bird itself feared the ground. Wildling villages emptied without scorch or blood. Rangers vanished as if swallowed by snow. Lord Commander Jeremy Mormont wrote with a soldier's hand, "We face more than cold. We face will. Send fire. Send men. Send hope." Aegon did not wait. He wore Longclaw at his hip, a warm cloak of direwolf fur, and the sober look he had carried since boyhood. At his side strode Daenerys in scaled leathers, stitched with threads of black iron. Above them, tilted wings, throwing off diamond chips of frost. Ned Stark, though age had nicked his breath and stiffened his hands, buckled on a light barney and a sword that had not drunk blood in 20 winters. "I hid him," Ned said to me, when I begged him spare his strength. "Let me now stand in the open with him." Robb rode in the van, Icefang, the great grey direwolf that shadowed him these last years, loping at his stirrup. The host that shook the King's Road was a river of peoples, bearded Northmen behind sledges of obsidian pikes, Vale lancers trotting 2 by 2, Dornish spears in close file beneath striped awnings, Reach engineers trundling peculiar wagons loaded with green jars and black shards. At Queen's Crown, they bivouacked in silent, snapping cold. I made my rounds, writing names and ranks, notes for the histories I vainly hoped to pen when all this had passed. Men and women spoke little. The wind did that for them. The battle for the dawn. Picture it with me, for I was there, and yet I still ask imagination's aid. A night that felt after the world, rather than before morning. The wall, blue-black under the moon, moaned as if in sleep. Soon it would wake to terror. At first light, horn calls cracked the air, 3 others. Out from the haunted forest came a white tide. The whites shambled first, edgeless and numberless, as if a snowbank had lifted and remembered legs. Behind them loped dead giants, hair and beards frozen into spears. Among their ankles flowed pale hounds with eyes like coins of cold fire. And at the last, in a prismatic quiet all its own, rode the others, the White Walkers, with armor that made moonlight sing and blades that breathed frost. "Light them!" Jon said. Sappers drew fire from trench to trench. Reach engineers touched fuse to wildfire. Green hell bent along the kill lanes before the wall. Whites went up like kindling, then kept walking headless, which was worse than any living terror. When the press narrowed, Veil scorpions loosed dragon glass bolts the length of saplings. Obsidian shattered cold bones to slush. Then, wings. Daenerys and Jon had planned 3 passes. Rhaegal and Viserion swept first, scorching the outer ranks. Drogon held high as reserve, a thunderhead of fire. Whites blackened and curled like leaves in oven heat. When the giants waded into trenches, Stormland mangonels, crewed by bull-shouldered smiths under Lord Gendry Baratheon, dropped coops of chain-weighted dragon glass upon their skulls. The giants fell like towers in slow collapse, smashing ranks beneath. Still they came. The breach. The others did not strike the main gate. They struck where the ice was oldest, and therefore most cracked. A curve of blue weakness east of the King's Gate, where the glacier had, over centuries, sagged upon bedrock. Their frost blades kissed the ice, and the wall screamed. That note was not sound, but pressure, felt in the teeth. A fissure opened, as neat as a mason's plumb line. "Queen's Gate! Move!" Robb bellowed. Northmen ran with sledges of obsidian pikes. Dornish spears locked shields. Icefang leapt the fissure in one grey blur and tore down a walker's pale mare. The walker fell, and Robb hammered an obsidian axe into its chest. The creature burst like a bell of brittle glass, and the whites nearest it dropped boneless to the snow. On the heights, Sir Tommen and the White Cloaks anchored a dragon glass ladder down the breach. Garland Tyrell brought his rose lances in tight wedge and walked them into the gap. A moving wall that gave not an inch. Dead piled high. Men slipped and rose and slipped again. The air cut throats. Breath turned to knives. The Night King. He came last. Where he stepped, frost webbed over flame. Where he turned his head, steel grew heavy and slow. He did not raise his hand to boast. He raised it to own. Bodies the living had just killed stood up again, smiling the wrong way. A spear of ice formed in his palm, as if he had pulled it from his own cold marrow. "Dany!" Jon barked, and that one syllable held plan and promise both. Drogon stooped out of cloud like a fallen star. Fire chewed the ground where the Night King had been, but the Night King wasn't there. Jon plunged toward him on foot, with Ghost snapping at his left and Long Claw in his right hand. The Night King did not look at Jon. He looked at Daenerys. 3 more ice spears grew like teeth in his hand and flew. Rhaegal banked, took one to the rib, screamed. Viserion caught another through the wingsail, staggered, held. Drogon clawed air and went vertical until the spear passed beneath his jaw like a comet that had missed its mark. The duel. The world narrowed, Jon and the Night King inside a little storm that moved with them. Sound dulled, breath smoked. Ice sword met Valyrian steel, and every clash cracked like a pond in deepest frost. Jon slipped once, knee striking ice so hard I felt it in my molars. The Night King stepped in for the killing stroke. Ghost hit him behind the knee with all the weight of the North and brought a heartbeat. In that heartbeat, Daenerys saw it, the opening. She drove Drogon down through stinging spindrift, so close his talons scraped blue ice.
Dracarys!
She cried, and dragonfire bellowed, not a stream but a curtain, a wall of day where night had stood. Jon lifted Long Claw crosswise, turning the last of the blue sword aside, and thrust up at the notch beneath the Night King's breastbone. Fire from above, Valyrian from below. The Night King shattered. I cannot give you a better word. He did not die. He became weather, snow, shards, steam, and all around the field bodies dropped as if the earth had relaxed its grip upon puppets. The spiders froze in place, a grotesque garden of frost. The silence that followed was terrible in its mercy. Dawn came, thin and honest. The final day of King Ned. The dead do not always take lives in battle. Sometimes they take them in the quiet after. Ned Stark had stood through the long night on the King's Tower with a line of archers half his age. He descended the ice stair at sunrise, slow, left knee, cursing winter. When he reached the breach where Robb was counting survivors, Ned laid a hand on his son's shoulder. "You held," he said, wonder and pride plain in his voice. "7 and the old gods, you held." He stepped aside to make room for a sled bearing wounded and set his shoulder to the runner, as he had long ago set it to the weight of a kingdom. His breath hitched. He did not drop. He sat as though his body had at last remembered a chair long denied him. I was there. I took his hand. It was still winter cold, yet the grip was steady. "Maester," he said, and the old Stark humor crept in even now. "Be sure you spell my name right." Then his eyes moved to Jon and Daenerys, advancing through steam and drift. "I carried truth like a blade," he murmured. "They'll carry it like a torch." King Eddard I, called the Wolf of the Dawn, died with a faint smile, the plain iron crown resting for the last time on fur-silver hair. The great council and the gentle coronation. They bore Ned south beneath a forest of direwolf banners. At Winterfell, Robb spoke over him beneath the hot tree, sap frozen in ruby tears. From there, Jon and Daenerys rode on, first to Harrenhal, where, as sworn in Part 3, a great council assembled. Lords from every kingdom, fat with relief and thin with loss, debated 3 days and 3 nights. Was a joint crown lawful? Could the North remain under Robb with more freedom than before? Might the faith and the old gods both bless one throne? They did what men do when they wish to claim wisdom. They followed what necessity had already decided. Before the High Septon in Baela's Sept, and with a solemn kiss to the heart tree boughs, Aegon Targaryen and Daenerys Targaryen were crowned. King and Queen of the 7 Kingdoms, partners in rule, ice and fire married in fact as well as fate. The Valyrian circlet that had once bitten cruelly into the brows of madmen and conquerors now sat lightly upon 2, who knew loss too well to prize bloodshed. Robb Stark took the style, warden and protector of the North, its laws and customs kept, its fealty sworn freely to the reunited crown. Sansa Stark, long the realm's sure voice in the Vale, kept her sky throne steady beside Lord Harold Hardyng, wise to the ways of courts and eyries both. Arya Stark, Wolf of the Road, sailed west with a Braavosi crew and a smile like a knife in moonlight. Bran sat beneath the boughs of Winterfell often enough that ravens mistook him for a carved god, and in council his words came slowly, precisely, like snow that never melts. At Dragonstone, Drogon brooded on warm rock, his shadow sweeping the sea like a sundial of summer. Rhaegal wore bent scars along one rib, and flew as if slightly remembering pain. The empty ledge where Viserion should have settled stayed empty, some scars are names. Years smoothed the realm's worst jagged edges. The Iron Islands learned profit from shipwrights' guilds and pearl taxes more reliably than from raiding. Dawn sent sand-skinned builders north to help restore Queensgate. Old Town opened a new black glass yard under the high tower, where boys and girls, yes, girls, scandal and triumph both, learned to set obsidian into tools none now hope to use again. Most nights, in the Wolfswood, you could still hear them, the dire wolves. More voices than when I first took vows. Not hungry, not near, simply present. The North kept guardians of fur and fang as surely as the South found guardians of fire and wing. And somewhere in the middle, at court, in councils, along roads lined in new-planted weirwood and elm, the two learned each other's steps. No red wedding stained these pages. No sack of King's Landing set children screaming in alley smoke. The wheel did not crush so much as click one spoke over. Ned Stark once told me, long before his crown, that honor without prudence is a sword with no hilt. He learned the hilt. He taught it to a realm. Thus ends my fourth and final scroll for this alternate story of Ned Stark's legend. If it pleased you to hear how the wolf learned patience, how the dragon learned mercy, and how the dawn can be wrested not by one hero's blaze, but by many steady hands, then give your voice to the record. History is not only ink and vellum, it is the tongues of all who remember. If you would sit at my hearth again, subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it binds our fellowship like wax binds a seal. May your hall fires burn warm, and may the wolves of winter guard your doors.